Today, I'm super excited to welcome Sam Yarborough. Sam, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I've been following you on LinkedIn for a bit. I know we've gone back and forth for a while, so I'm super excited to have this conversation. So, before we get started, I think it would be amazing if you take maybe a couple of minutes, introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, so grateful to be here. I know it has taken us a minute. Excited for the conversation today. But as mentioned, my name is Sam. I live in Bozeman, Montana with my husband, Jason. We both work in partnerships and now are co founders to a company called Arcadia. But we've spent the last decade plus in technology partnerships and have seen kind of transformations over time of how technology plays into things, how people are thinking about partnerships, how teams are now thinking about this as like a must have rather than a nice to have. So my expertise has really fallen into the Salesforce ecosystem and kind of those larger hyperscalers, cloud ecosystems, and how as an ISV you can really make an impact for your company and the Salesforces of the world through partnerships. So excited to be here today.
Terrific. You've had an amazing background. I was going through it, and it has not been linear. It has
No.
been quite a bit. You had an amazing journey. So, you want to talk a little bit about that? What sort of path you followed, why you followed, and how you ended up in Montana?
Yeah, totally. I'm from Montana, actually, born and raised, but I left for about 10 years after graduating college. My degree is actually I have a fine arts degree in graphic design, which is a helpful skill, although AI is making that accessible to everybody these days. But let's see where to start. So I actually started in advertising, which was something that I really loved. I designed or was creative director for large billboards in metropolitan areas, and I worked with huge brands and also very small mom and pop companies. But that was a really helpful time in my career because it helped me learn sales. It helped me learn how to speak to executives, how to get buy-in, but also be really creative in my thinking in the way that I was messaging and creating campaigns for people. So those skills translated certainly beyond the that time in my life. I then moved to marketing just because it felt like the right thing for me to do. I liked thinking of the larger strategic picture when I was talking with my clients. And then I fell into partnerships, I think, as most partner professionals do these days. And most of them do have kind of a squirmy career path to get there. But my first partnerships job was at a company called PFL, which stands for Print for Less. And we had a lot of technology partners, but our major partner was Salesforce, and where I got into the game. And we can go from there, but don't want to keep talking if you have more questions.
Let's talk about Salesforce because it's an amazing ecosystem. It possibly has a
Yeah.
little bit of everything and a lot of Salesforce. But going back when you started in Salesforce, how was it structured? What was their kind of program like? How did you participate as a partner? What was the mechanics?
Okay, so great question. When I took over the program, I was honestly so not excited about it. I so there was a woman who ran the program before me, years before me. She was no, we never overlapped, but her name's Yarborough. She's phenomenal. And so she started the program and then she left the company. A few people came and went in between, but the partnership had like almost died, honestly. Like it was there, but it was super reactive. There was no new relationships or strategy going on. So when I took over the program, we had a ton of partners across like agencies, technology partners, and then we had this Salesforce partnership. And I just looked at data and nothing was great, but there was like a few leads that would trickle in from Salesforce. So I was like, let's start there. Let's see what happens there. So to be honest, I remember my first conversation with my Salesforce counterpart. Joe Andreka was his name. He's wicked smart and like he was there for 10 years. And he was telling me like all the technicalities of Salesforce and whatnot. And I remember thinking in my head, like, I'm screwed. Like, I've been way over my head. I don't know what he's talking about. Like, how am I ever going to make an impact in this huge ecosystem? And you really just start small. And that's what we did. It was like, okay, instead of trying to be, we were a horizontal partner, meaning we could service every customer in the Salesforce ecosystem. But instead of doing that, I focused on verticalizing to a few key use cases and then just started making relationships with those industry teams. So we started with healthcare and financial services a little bit. But from there, it really just started to snowball. So meet one person, do what you say you're going to do, deliver value. And then they just started to help. Wait, you should meet this other AE who has a similar client, or you should talk to my RVP because we all have clients like this. And so starting small, asking a ton of questions, and just showing up really sounds simple, but that's the key.
How was the engagement? Like, was it all emails, phone calls? You had to go to a lot of events. Like, how did you actually operationalize that?
All of the above. So let's see. I'm trying to like think back to the actual days of it. Email was a huge part of it. So was phone calls, but being in person, I think that's one of the most underestimated keys of a Salesforce ecosystem, and frankly, any ecosystem. Partnerships is a relationship business, and relationships grow a lot faster when you can see someone face to face, and then you can have those personal connections you can follow up on. So I did travel a lot. I went to most of the Salesforce conferences, but I was also super value driven. So when I would meet with Salesforce AEs or SEs, it was never like to waste their time. It was like, I know you have this customer. Here's how I can solve that for them. And here's what that means for you, AE. It's going to be more adoption of the platform for the customer, which means more money in your pocket. They're also not spending that money on Salesforce right now, so they will be. And it's more efficiency for the customer. Yeah, it's a relationship business, but it's also being really dialed in on your messaging and making sure you can deliver value quickly.
In these kind of roles, especially in large organizations, not just Salesforce, people change a lot, right? They good AEs
Yes.
get promoted, and the ones
Yes.
that are not making numbers, they don't have stay back. So there are a lot of changes. So how did you handle those sort of, you invest so much building these relationships and then suddenly comes new into a role and you're just another email.
Mhm.
Like how do you restart? What did you do?
Yes, this was the bane of my existence, especially at Salesforce because they every January, I guess their end of year is January, so it's probably more February, but they call it go for growth. And they literally shuffle everything. So everybody gets new accounts, there's promotions, there's layoffs. So it's all the data you had from the previous year worthless because you don't know who owns what accounts, who owns whatever. However, that was really helpful in some ways if you could look at it, because any relationship that I had built the previous year, I could then go back and say, okay, it's February 15th. What new accounts do you have? Remember how we worked together last year on those accounts? What can we do from a new perspective this year? So it opened up new opportunities for pipeline. But one thing that I think is really crucial is staying in contact with these people. So I got to know the AEs really well. Like, I don't really do work with Salesforce right now, but I still text with 30 people on a monthly basis because I've just gotten to know their family and their kids and what they're excited about and built personal relationships with them so that as they got promoted or switched industries or whatever, I then could go with them. And that meant business for our company.
And as they switched, let's say when they went to other companies or other, because Salesforce is a huge, they have a huge line card, multiple products, multiple clouds, various sort of attach. So how did that sort of play out for you? Did you kind of move with the AEs as they move from one part of the business to another or one company to another or?
Sometimes. So not so much company because we didn't have like integrations and whatnot to like leverage, but it did occasionally open up like new use cases or new ICPs for us as a partner. For instance, somebody's typically not going to go from like healthcare to manufacturing, but they may go from like providers to payers. And those are different customer bases and different use cases. But if I have a relationship built with them and they understand what my product did, then when I reach out to them, they're like, actually, you know what? I'm in a new industry right now, and there could actually be something you could help with. And so then all of a sudden, as a partner, we have a new inroad to something that we hadn't even considered before. So staying close to people, even if there's not like immediate value right then and there, I think is, again, an underutilized tactic.
And they were what, like they were about $20 billion in revenue at that time, or what was their roughly size? Somewhere around there?
Probably. I have no
Probably,
idea,
yeah, right now.
honestly,
Yeah,
but
they doubled
yeah.
over the last 10 years, so they're about close
Yeah.
to 50 pushing. So the reason I brought up the revenue is after a certain size, which is possibly a billion or so, organizations are complex. They're rolled up across business
Totally.
lines, right? So once you form those relationships, they're very valuable, but then you have to live up with those changes. Talk to me a little bit about, like, from a partner side. Last year I spoke to maybe about 20 partners, but 60 plus or so professionals on the vendor side and brand side. And you always get a different perspective from the partner side. How everybody's talking about ideal partner profile
Mm.
and going after recruitment, putting business plans together, aligning resources, and co-sell has become a big buzzword. So if you dial back about 10 years ago, from the partner perspective, then and now, do you think things have changed, or are they, because 10 years ago people didn't talk about all these things on the brand side. They're like, they're
Hmm.
just resellers or some sort of an ISV or SI, or categories were relatively simple, journeys were relatively linear. So, from a partner perspective, do you think things have changed, or are they roughly the same?
That's a great question. It's interesting. Jason and I were having this discussion yesterday about how, like, ABM, it may be a thing of the past. He said that. And I was like, is it really though? Or has it just been rebranded to something else? Like, it's all the same methods and motions that we're putting forward. It's just under a different guise. So, has it changed? Probably a little bit, but I think the tactics and like the foundational key points are the same. So, co-sell is still really important. Recruiting partners, yes. I think where people get into trouble is they're looking at the wrong metrics. Like, I was just talking to somebody the other day and they're new to a partner role, and their company gave them the metric of recruit as many partners as you can in Q1. And I said, why? Like, what are you doing with those partners? And they're like, it'll open up more opportunity. And it's, are you enabling them? Are you setting up actually, like, setting up and executing co-sell plans? Do you have co-marketing plans with all of these partners? And so I think people get stuck in the trap of more is better. And that's absolutely not true. I think if you can get like a few partners and get your motion like really dialed, then you can repeat that with more and more partners. But you're going to spread yourself so thin that no partners are going to be successful in that case. The thing that I'm not sure about, and I think we're all learning about now, is obviously AI. Like, how is that going to play into it? I think there's a lot of things that partner managers and partner executives spend their time doing that can be off put with AI. But the relationships and the actual conversations with your partner counterpart, I think, are those still remain.
I don't know, but a couple of decades ago, maybe a little bit even more, there was a consulting company here in Silicon Valley, Ron Roner Associates. And Ron Roner coined a term called, from the brand perspective, when they're looking at go to market through an
Mm-hmm.
indirect motion, first was channel ready, and then second was channel worthy, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So the second word is possibly the most complex one, which kind of alludes to what you just said, that you're going to recruit a whole bunch of partners. What would it really mean to you? From the
Yeah.
partner perspective, when you got put into the Salesforce role, how did you, was it a mandate you had to make it work, or was it your entrepreneurial side? They said, hey, there's something we has to be like, how did you make it worthy of your efforts, your comp? And then it kept on, like, how did you have a framework in mind when you went after that relationship?
That's a good question. I've never been asked it in that frame. Probably both. Now, hindsight is probably my entrepreneurial side of, wait a minute, there's a there. But I remember the moment. So I made a connection with this AE. She was on like mid-size, low enterprise financial services. And I had a conversation with her. I was like, listen, this is what we do from a product perspective, and this is how it can help your customers. This is how it can help you. Again, I think my marketing background was really helpful because I was like, this is the messaging, this is how it's dialed. And she was like, you know what? This is awesome. I'd love to invite you to do like a lunch and learn with all of my customers. And
That's huge.
so it was huge. And I was like, okay. So she invited me to this lunch and learn. And I think there were like 20 customers that showed up. And I went and delivered. And then I told my CEO that had happened. And he stopped and he looked at me and he was like, 20 customers? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, do you know how long it takes our BDR team to book 20 meetings. And I was like, a month? And he was like, yeah. And he's, so how often can you do this within the ecosystem? And I was like, I could probably do 3 a month. So that math just was like, okay, there's something here. And so I think it's figuring out, again, could I do that with 12 partners? No. But could I go all in on Salesforce and start to build these relationships and ask for referrals and navigate the org chart that way? Yeah. And was it going to pay dividends? It did. Like by the time I was done there, we sourced 65% of all company revenue through the Salesforce ecosystem. And I think focus is really key.
Absolutely. And one of the major thing, and I've spoken to several guests, is that 10 years ago, for sure 20 years ago, people used to sell mostly things. Unless you're Oracle selling a middleware, goes as a patty and a bun and a whole bunch of lettuce and tomato in it, right? That was different. But today, there are very few single product solutions. Of course, some of these tools like Lovable and Replit that are coming out, and they're going to get into businesses, but they're essentially point product, even though some of these GPT and others also. The complexity of the sale, when you think about the Salesforce time, the line card that you carried, were they pretty much linear products like a CRM or a Success, or were they more complex? What was the nature of the bundle that you sold?
It depends. So I think it depends more and more as we got up market into enterprise situations. And this was where you had to get creative about thinking too. Like a lot of people come into the Salesforce ecosystem and they're like, I have nothing to offer. Like a lot of Salesforce AEs would be like, do you have any new customers for me? And I'm like, absolutely not, because the customers have to be yours before I can work with them. And so we didn't really do bundles, but I had to get really creative about thinking about, okay, how can I make this the easiest sale for the Salesforce AE to bring us into? How can I remove as many roadblocks as possible? And I think this is where partner people, you have to talk to finance, you have to talk to product, you have to talk to pricing and like figure out what can we do to make this about the partner and not about us? Because if I can make it easier, I'm going to get 20 customers. If I can make it harder, we're going to get none. And again, I think that's why partner people are so interesting, because you got to wear every single hat. You can't just be sales. You can't just be marketing. You got to be thinking around all edges of it. Oh, that really answers your question.
I'm just going to build on that a little bit. When you think about Salesforce, it's a business process automation tool, right? Everything that they sell, some form or shape.
Sure.
Sometimes it's one function, sometimes it's multiple functions.
Yep.
And so at the current moment, when you look at platforms like Salesforce, one of the big focus that they have, and we're an ISV partner for Salesforce. We've been working with them almost a decade. It's a great company to work with. We also complete a lot of their pieces that they don't have from a partner relationship management wise. But one of the main challenge is when you're selling a solution, because it is a component to a solution, because customers are looking for outcome. So as a partner, do you think companies that are selling business process automation, do they have some unique structure that is not there if you're just a network integrator or other solution? What were the unique components that you brought in to Salesforce from an organizational perspective, other than, above and beyond your tenacity, your persistence, your way to connect with people? What did the company bring into Salesforce?
Yeah, great question. And so much. Like when it was always so weird telling people we did. We did direct mail. We automated direct mail within the Salesforce ecosystem, which on paper, those two things don't really go hand in hand. Like Salesforce is a CRM. What does that have to do with direct mail? So we had to get really clear and concise about what does that mean for the customers and how is that going to make the Salesforce team more effective? And so for us, this is why we went into regulated industries. Healthcare and financial services by law are required to send direct mail pieces to customers for certain stages of the customer journey. That lived completely outside of Salesforce until we came along. And so just like you said, you all do, like we were filling holes for the ecosystem that no one else was filling. And again, we were creating more product usage for the Salesforce AEs. We were automating things that customers were having to do manually, and we were saving budget for them. And so it was being really crisp and clear on this is a problem you have, this is how we solve it, and this is how we're going to make it easy for you to do. So yeah, without that, my tenacity would be nothing. But being super clear on what holes do you fill for the customer and Salesforce, you got to start there.
Yeah, and then going back to the conversation that you had this with the other person that he had a mandate to recruit as many partners. I guess the biggest challenge is to figure out what holes are these partners going to plug in pre-sales and post-sales.
Totally. And what are you going to do to enable? How are you going to market that? How are you going to co-sell on those things? Like every partnership is different. An integration does not equal a partnership. There's a whole host of things that go around that I think get skipped often.
One of the big force today, especially on the tech side, and I also see in our manufacturing customers are getting on that bandwagon, is marketplaces, right? They're because when you look at a 30, 40, $50 billion Fortune companies and Fortune 100 companies, a decent portion of their infrastructure they purchase from these big three marketplaces. So therefore, they have private offers, they have other things. They already have contract possibly in Salesforce. So when you're an existing, let's say when you're a partner trying to break into an existing motion, right? And you made a very important point that you went to Salesforce when they asked you, hey, do you have any new accounts? And they said, they have to be your accounts. What were the tactics you think that worked then and could work now? Because you're breaking into someone else's territory, some other partners is there, they're possibly competing for the same business. How do you so nudge him out or get him into an opportunity and start that? That is the most challenging thing. It's not just you're breaking into a huge company like Salesforce and building relationship. You're also getting into a territory, possibly switching partners and going in and pitching. Can you walk us through that journey? Because I rarely get a chance to talk to a partner about that sort of that part of the struggle that vendors very rarely worry about.
I think again, it starts small. So I think it can be really overwhelming to be like, okay, I'm going to go into Salesforce or AWS or whatever and become the go-to vendor for direct mail, whatever it is. That's a nice goal, but you have to pick an industry, pick a use case, and then like only focus on that, get some wins, start to develop those one-on-one relationships with AEs or SEs or whoever your point of contact is, and then really show value. And so I think that's, again, I've said this maybe too many times on this podcast, but do what you say you're going to do and make it easy for them. And then once you get a win, which like that first win can be such an uphill battle, but once you get a closed deal with somebody, scream it from the rooftops. Go tell every other contact that you've ever met, hey, we just helped John close this deal. Here's what we solved. Here's what it meant for John. Can we do the same for your customer? And it just is going to start to snowball. But if you try to spray the ocean, you're going to fail. But you got to start small, build those first wins, those first relationships, and then start to leverage from there. And I think that's the best way to success, which seems backwards because you're like, Salesforce should be fast. Once I have an integration, leads will come. Absolutely not. That is so far from the truth.
And so when you think about this massive change that's happening, that not just Salesforce, but every other company, existing software company, and even tech companies, they're trying to pivot towards this thing called AI. They're all trying to figure out, because it's easier to integrate as technologies and build things, but it's very hard to figure out whether the enterprise will really adopt, right? So there is beyond the initial hype, for sure, we started to see second half of 2025 is that there's a lot of questioning coming in. How much should we invest in R&D? What level of AI are we going to integrate? And then on the customer side, the investment we need to make. Does that make it more difficult for new partners to break in, or does it make it easier for new partners to break into this sort of, I wouldn't say foggy, but not clearly defined what's going to happen moment in 2026?
Totally. And I think I'm excited you asked this question. I don't know the answer. My opinion on this is, okay, so I think when was this? It would have been May of last year, maybe December. I can't remember. But Salesforce asked me to come speak on stage about why partners should be thinking about Agentforce. And I was like, I don't know, because it's so new. And Salesforce is like, Agentforce. Benioff is like going to change the name of Salesforce to Agentforce. And if you go talk to a Salesforce AE and you don't have Agentforce as like the part of your pitch or a part of your pitch, forget it. But we're all still, wait a minute, what does it do? And how do I build this? And I don't have resources to go to my executive team and say, okay, I need us to drop what we're doing and go build an agent because that's what's required to be a Salesforce partner right now. It's a really tough thing to do when you don't have an ROI on the other side of it because it hasn't been done yet. And so I think you have to think about this you have to change the lens a little bit. Salesforce is telling people, or they were, that this is like the price to pay, and early adopters are going to get more attention. They're going to get more resources from Salesforce. And so I think right now, the best thing you can do as an ISV is have a foot in the game. Like, just be experimenting, be open to conversations. You don't have to go all out and build the next AI agent, but you have to be open to having conversations and seeing how you can grow alongside the platform. Because if you don't, you're going to be left behind because everybody else is. And so I think that's a really interesting thing. That's a new thing that partner people have to pitch to their executive teams of, okay, now this is part of the game. We got to at least have a little bit of this on our roadmap. We got to be thinking about this because we can't just ignore it. And that's challenging because Salesforce is still figuring out what the ROI on this is. They're still figuring out the commercials of it. And so that is a big challenge.
And they're definitely a leading voice, and it's quite amazing some of the use cases they have shared at the last two
Totally.
And we have customers that did POC, some of them are continuing. But I want to build on that a little bit and go to your other half of, or maybe more than other half now today, and the other brands that you work with. What are you seeing when it comes to partnership and looking into 2026? What do you think we left in 2025? How real is this sort of integration of AI into products, into processes, and upskilling people? Is it just staying at a GPT and a lovable level, or what are you seeing? What do you think is going to happen in the partnership space this year in a very real way?
I think it parallels what I was just saying from a company perspective. But as individual partner leaders and managers, you've got to at least be experimenting and figuring this out. I was having this conversation within our Arcadia community the other day about AI. And again, what can we do that's not leveraging the humanity of partnerships to offset with AI? And I think there's a lot we can do. Like partner matches. Okay, is that going to be like an end all be all? Can we use AI to partner match? Yes. But then you're going to have to go have a conversation with a human and understand, what did you say? Channel worthy.
Channel ready and channel worthy. Yeah.
Channel worthy. Yeah. Is it channel worthy? So I think that it's an expectation now that AI is part of your workflow. And if it's not, then you're behind, to put it blankly. And so having communication with us about people, figuring out, what are you doing that's working? What are you not doing that's working? Like, those were the conversations we were having within the community, and you can't ignore it. It's going to be here, but really doubling down on those one-to-one personal relationships is never going to go away. I think that's hugely important.
When you go back to application wise, I mean, at the end of 25, did you see, and I'm going to maybe throw a few examples out that at least we're seeing from our customer base that they have interest in. Mm-hmm. Time will tell how far they drive and deploy it. But for example, partner assist bot, like building knowledge bases. So at a point of use, whether they're getting into a portal or instead of waiting for a sales email, they go somewhere and ask questions, some sort of an assistant, right? Then going back to actual motions, whether from a co-selling perspective, trying to put a pricing bundle together, and the system is saying, if you're selling this, customers like this also would like that, some sort of a recommendation engine. Yeah. And then if you've sold certain things, your learning system comes and says, 67% of the partners that have sold this also sold that. So therefore, look at the certification. So there's a pragmatic thing that are bubbling up. It's certainly not pervasive, but have you seen from your community that there people are saying, you know what, this is one use case I'm going to drive in 26 because I started to see benefit of that?
Yeah, I think we're all still experimenting, to be honest. I haven't seen somebody that's this is the best thing ever and it has no flaws. I think that one thing that keeps coming up a lot is enablement. And you just mentioned it there too. I have a partner who has a question. How can I remove that from a human to human and just have them search a database? I think that's a great use case. But like onboarding new partners completely via I haven't seen it work super well yet because adoption of that kind of stuff is just not high. And so I think you can spend a ton of time building the resources, building the LMM to be an enablement resource, but then our partner's actually going to use that. I don't know. And that's a tough thing where we're figuring out. So I think it's both. It's how can we leverage that, but then also how do we make sure that the humanity stays within it too? So, a partner goes and figures out something from the LLM. Okay, what's the human outreach on the back end of that? Did you figure out what you need? How can I help? Like, we can't just remove people out of this, in my opinion.
And when I watch from outside in this Arcadia thing that you and Jason have built and trying to grow, to me it comes across, and maybe that's where my insecurity kind of kicks in. It looks so non-tech and it's so personal and so connected. And it is like the opposite of what AI is trying to be and fake it through its process. I wonder, going back to your own personal journey, I'd love to have a reflection on this. These connections that you made, which they didn't come from partner matching. They came from picking up the phone, connecting with somebody. You created the match because you would not pass through their filter if they did partner match at the moment because you were not selling
No
Salesforce.
way. No
You had
way.
no profile. So there is
Yeah.
no ideal partner profile. It was purely a connection that you created and you built on that. What happens to that when everything becomes a reflection of past data and past performance and an algo? Do people is it all does it all go to people who are selling and all the new people are now blocked out because they have no profiles and they're
They have
not
no
getting picked
data.
up? What happens? Or you need more
Man,
Arcadia everywhere?
that's such a sad thought, but it's so true. Like when you said that, I immediately thought about like people who are searching for jobs right now. Like if they don't know somebody at the company, their resume is never going to get through because of exactly everything you just said. And yeah, I think you're spot on there. You have to start somewhere. And if we just would have gone through some AI filter at PFL, we would have never made it ever. A direct mail company. Are you kidding me? But yeah, it's those personal relationships. It's really driving and delivering value. And it is having tenacity. It is doing things that don't make sense. It is spending too much money taking people out to dinner and then following up to no end. Those things still have a place. And I'm not saying AI doesn't because it does, but we can't over index on that.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that is a real example. This whole talent search, automated engines. What's happening is people are using sort of Gen AI to build their resumes and build their responses, and they're creating 60 different profiles of themselves, which to some extent they're possibly not. And these ATS system, they're screening them out, and people are now trying to create completely through. And I've seen it here in Silicon Valley, and we started a founders group trying to put founders and investors together. We just put just a link out on Luma, and we had 116 people register. We're like, what? People don't even know us. And when they came, one of the biggest thing was people just want to connect, and I don't think it was
Totally.
there at that level. And maybe what you're doing in Arcadia, and I'd love to know a lot more. To me, from outside, people like me, it's a big struggle for me to put myself out on these podcasts because I'm an engineer. I'd rather look at my shoes than look at anybody else. But there is a part of it that makes me incredibly comfortable with AI, which is possibly not real
Mm.
because it puts me even in a corner that I should not be. So can you talk a little bit about Arcadia, what you're trying to do, what your vision is, how did you start, why you're doing it, where do you think it will end up, where do you want it to
Yeah.
end up? I'd love to hear more.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. And let's see, we started 3 years ago. And so when we started, AI was definitely on the scene, but not like it is today. And I think that just solidified what we were trying to do. Originally, it started with, again, I mentioned my husband and I both do this. We were on the road all the time. Like show floors were where we lived. And it just got so monotonous of like, how's business? How's your pipeline? And like we would go to these show floors and it was like, wait, I see you every month at these shows, and I know nothing about you because we put on these like business personas and we never step out of it. So we're like, let's throw a conference where people actually can show up as themselves. They can bond over real experiences and we can talk about real things while still becoming better at our jobs, better leaders, all the things. And so the first one was 2 years ago, three years ago. We're putting on our third. It's in Montana. It was at a glamping resort. It was insane. We were like saying this out loud is still really, we did that. We're still doing that. 45 people showed up and the response that we got was like much better and better than anything I ever expected. Like, this sounds so cheesy, but literally people were like, that was life changing. I built relationships there that I will carry out throughout the rest of my life. Like, I learned things about myself that I'm going to take forth and become a better leader. And so Arcadia at its core means harmony. And our whole premise is you can be awesome at your job, but if you aren't great at all the other parts of your life, then that's not sustainable. And so how can you show up to every component of your life and be the best version of yourself so that in your jobs, in your communities, in your families, in your friendships, you can be the best version of yourself and show up as the best leader you can be. And so Arcadia we have our leadership retreat. We're doing it again this summer. It is a glamping retreat, so you do have to be a little comfortable with outside. But we do that on purpose because we've seen it happen. But when you sit down with somebody and you go fly fishing for the afternoon, or you go on a hike, or we do yoga. Last year we did flower pounding. Like, we do all sorts of different things, but you just create such better relationships when you experience something with somebody. And it's a whole different thing than sitting in a keynote or sitting at a happy hour. Like, those are fleeting relationships. And then we started a community this September as well because people wanted more. And the community, we definitely talk about go-to-market for sure, but we also talk about things like consciousness and how that plays into how you lead your teams and your families. Or we just went through a core values exercise and really determining your core values and how that can change the way you make decisions on the job you take, where you live, how you wake up in the morning. And so it's a whole person philosophy, all geared around being the best leader you can be.
Amazing. Sam, I really appreciate you spending the time with me here today. I'd love to have you back. And I will definitely connect with you to find out more about Arcadia to see if I can muster some courage to show up.
But it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much for the time and the thoughtful questions.